Happy New Year, everyone! As we are drawing an end to the year and the decade, I thought of sharing what the best books of 2019 were, in my opinion. These books were not published in 2019. Instead, they are books that I read in 2019 that I really enjoyed. Obviously, if I included all of my favorites of this year, this would have been a very long list. But in this list, I have 14 books of 2019 that I've really enjoyed. The first book is my favorite book of the year. It was the first book I read by Lucy Maud Montgomery after being introduced to her writing, and it is Anne of Green Gables. I've reviewed this book already, and this book is the story of an orphan girl, Anne Shirley, who warms the hearts of the Cuthberts and everyone in Avonlea after she arrives. The book is a coming-of-age story and includes 5 full years of her life. This was the first book ever published by Lucy Maud Montgomery. However, it is still one of the best, though she did not have that much of experience writing novels when writing this book. The second book on this list is House of Dreams by Liz Rosenberg. This book was published in 2018, but I read it in the beginning of 2019. It is a biography of Lucy Maud Montgomery, written by Liz Rosenberg. This was the book that introduced me to Lucy Maud Montgomery. The reason why I picked up this book was because it was about a girl named Maud who loved reading and writing and who adored stories. It seemed like I had found my kindred spirit, so I decided to read the book, and then I found out that the story was a true story and Lucy Maud Montgomery was actually an author. And this book is about the full life of Lucy Maud Montgomery. It is over 300 pages with about 21 chapters. The third book is Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott. This is quite a lengthy classic because it is divided into 2 parts. The first part is Little Woman and the second part is Good Wives, which is why this book is nearly 600 pages. This book is the story of the 4 March sisters and their lives as they grow up. I read this book right after I read Anne of Green Gables, and I enjoyed this book almost as much, though I didn't enjoy it as much as Anne of Green Gables. I still think this is one of my favorite books of the year. It is the first and only book I've read by Louisa May Alcott. The fourth book is My 13th Winter by Samantha Abeel, which is actually a memoir. It was a very short memoir that I read for my school's memoir book club. The fifth book is The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, which is a diary of Anne Frank's life when she lived during the Holocaust. It is amazing how such a young girl had the will to survive and did, until the very end when she died. The next book is The Pearl by John Steinbeck, and we actually read 2 novels so far in English class in 8th grade. Down a Dark Hall by Lois Duncan and The Pearl by John Steinbeck, so I was a little confused which one to pick, but I chose The Pearl because I enjoyed it a lot more than Down a Dark Hall, though I did enjoy that book as well. We just finished reading this book actually in English class for my course this month, and I really enjoyed the book. This book is not a very long book. It's actually considered a novella. It's around 90 pages and it has only about 6 chapters. Despite having only 90 pages, it feels a lot longer than it is because the book is very descriptive and it feels like many events have occurred in the mere 90 pages of the book. This is the story of a pearl diver, Kino, and his love for his family, his wife Juana, and his infant child Coyotito. And one of the most common themes in the story, or theme topics I should say, actually it's a theme, is greed as a destructive force. It's not shown in his character as much as it is shown in the other characters, such as the pearl buyers and many of the other characters in the story. The ending of the story really was what made me feel what Kino had learned and how Kino had changed and how Juana had changed too. The next book is actually not a book. It's not a full-length novel. It's a short story, but I still thought I would mention it because it's a story that we read actually in my English class, and I really enjoyed it. I also wanted to include at least one mystery story in this video, and I couldn't think of any, so I decided to include this in the list. The Landlady was a short story again that we read in English class, and it is a story of only two main characters. One of them is Billy Weaver, who's only a 17-year-old boy. He's very young, and the landlady. And one of the themes here is appearance versus reality and how people are not always as they appear, which is what we see with the landlady who, I don't want to spoil it, but in the end, who poisons him because of a few reasons, which you will learn when you read the story. The next book is The Story Girl by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is another one of my favorite books, especially by Lucy Maud Montgomery. In some ways, I enjoyed reading Anne of Green Gables more than The Story Girl, but in other ways, I actually enjoyed reading The Story Girl more than Anne of Green Gables, but I can't really compare and I can't really decide which one I like more. The Story Girl is not as valuable, I should say, as Anne of Green Gables in the literary world, but it's still a story that I really enjoyed. It is a story of it's narrated by Beverly, who comes to spend one summer with his cousins, and one of his cousins is the Story Girl. All the cousins are very different, but the Story Girl, Sarah Stanley, is able to entertain everyone with her skill at storytelling. The next book is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which I recently finished reading. I have read a lot of Pride and Prejudice too, but I just didn't include it in the list because I haven't read the whole book. I have read almost all of it. Northanger Abbey I decided to include because it was a Jane Austen book I read. I just started reading Jane Austen this year. I started reading Charles Dickens last year. I didn't finish any of his books this year, which is why I haven't included his books on this list. Anyways, Northanger Abbey is a story of Catherine Morland and Henry Tinley and their relationship when Catherine leaves her home in Wiltshire to spend a few weeks in Bath. This is where she meets Henry, and she is then invited by Henry's sister, Eleanor, to spend a few days at the estate in Northanger Abbey. This is another one of those books that's divided into two parts. Although it's less than 300 pages, it still took me a long time to read because it's divided into two parts and because the story involves many events. The next book is The Alpine Path by Lucy Maud Montgomery, which is a very short book, I should say. I finished reading it in a day while I was traveling to India. This book will always have a special place in my heart because it was the first book I ever read on my Kindle, and it was a book that I was glad that I was able to find on my Kindle because I couldn't find it anywhere, and I'd been wanting to read it ever since I discovered Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is Lucy Maud Montgomery's memoir written by her, which I really enjoyed reading. She talks about her childhood experiences, how she became a writer, and how she became the author that she did. The next book is the last book actually I read by Lucy Maud Montgomery very recently. I just finished it. It's a collection of short stories, and it's the Complete Christmas Stories by Lucy Maud Montgomery, which has many Christmas stories by her. There are also a few New Year stories, but all of the stories are set in December and revolve around winter. Most of them are Christmas stories, but I think 3 of them are New Year stories as well. And all of the stories are different, they're not interlinked. But one thing that all the stories have in common is, that most of the stories have in common, is the love and the giving of them. Most of the stories do have happy endings, but the first one does not, which is The Red Room, actually. The next book on this list, actually the next 2 books, are 2 books by Frances Hodgson Burnett, whose 2 books I read this year. I couldn't choose between A Little Princess and The Secret Garden because I love both, so I decided to include both. Both books are books that I enjoyed, but in very different ways. A Little Princess is more of that fairy tale story where there are no gray characters. All the characters are black and white, but I still enjoyed it. It's the story of a girl in a boarding house and how she enjoys her life even after losing her fortunes. Whereas The Secret Garden is a story of an orphan girl who changes throughout the story. It's a coming of age story of how she changes and learns to change through nature and through the secret garden on the moors of Yorkshire. And the last book that I have to talk about is Heidi by Johanna Spyri, which I again read this year. And it is the story of a young girl, Heidi. This book is set in Switzerland. She is from the Swiss Alps in Mainfield, and she comes up to the village of Dorfli to live with her grandfather. Her aunt Detty sends her there. After 2 or 3 years, she is sent to Germany. She's sent to Frankfurt to live with a few friends that live there. She doesn't enjoy the experience there at first. After she moves back to Dorfli, she then learns, and she takes whatever she's learned from Germany, and she uses it in Dorfli. So these were all of the books that I think are my top favorite. Obviously, there are other books that I wish I could have included in this list but didn't, but I will talk more about them next year in 2020, and the first day is actually tomorrow, surprisingly. I really enjoyed this year. It was, I don't know if it was the best year of my life, but it was a very short year, and I wish it wasn't so short, but I still really enjoyed this year. And I submitted a short story that I was very proud of for the first time, and I think that's what I really enjoyed about this year, and also the wonderful books that I was able to read. I hope you had an amazing 2019. Happy New Year. I hope you enjoyed your Christmas as well, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, then I hope you enjoyed the holidays and the beginning of winter. I hope you have a wonderful 2020, and it will now be 100 years since the Roaring Twenties. So once again, have a happy new year, and I'll see you next time. Bye!